welcome back, and today we're going to be looking at some jogged dimensions using AutoCAD. And you're going to see that it's kind of simple to do, but there are some things that you're going to have to set up. So before we get started, let's go ahead and analyze this drawing to see exactly what we need to define when we're going to put these jog dimensions on. So the first thing I need to locate is where exactly are these centers of the circles, or do I have enough information for them? So I'll just use the highlighting tool here, and you can see that this circle here, the center of it is located 14 to the left off of this edge and 180 down from it. So those these two numbers are going to tell me where the center is to that overall circle that has a radius of 200. So everything I need to satisfy that circle is complete. The next circle that I do have on here is going to be this little small arc here, and you can see that it has a radius of 112. Now, finding the x dimension of that center is easy. We can see that it's 56. But where is it located going on the y-axis? Well, we know the radius of this, and that tells me how far it's going to be located down, and it's going to be located down from this point at this end point. So that's why they're giving me a dimension of 6. So that defines how far it is down from this edge. And then I have the overall radius. So that can tell me from this edge going all the way down, the distance of that should be 106. So those two numbers are going to be super important when we go to create this and build this. All right, so let's go ahead and switch on over to AutoCAD and get started. So a couple of first things that I'm going to go ahead and do is that I'm going to go ahead and start off with a couple of lines here. So I'll start with the line command. And I want to go this way. Make sure that you're going in a horizontal direction, and I'm using the polar tracking. If you are more comfortable with using the ortho, just so you can make sure you keep those lines horizontal and vertical, I can select this option here, and that'll make sure that I'm going to keep a horizontal line, and that distance will be 56. Alright, so next I'm going to go ahead and create the vertical line. So I'll go back to the line command. I'll go from this end point, and I don't know how far to go up, but if we go back and take a look at the drawing, we can give a pretty good guess of how far we want to go up. So look back at the drawing here, that I see that this dimension is 200, and I also see that it's dropping down from this edge at 180. So the length of this line should be somewhere approximately a distance of 20. Now, I'm not going to make that line exactly 20 because I can come back and I can trim it off, but I know that I need to make it at least 20. So let's go ahead and switch back and make our vertical line going at least 20. Okay, so back in AutoCAD, since we know the length of that line is somewhere around 20, I'm just going to make it 25. And everything I need for this should be completed on that part. Now, I know that I have a thickness of how wide this offset is. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the offset command. Go ahead and offset that dimension of 1. Then I'll go ahead and place both of those there. Now I'll come back and trim this up and finish it later. Alright, so let's go ahead and define our first circle, which is going to be our big arc that's located here. So I'm going to use a circle, center, radius, a circle, center, radius. And now it's asking me from the center point. I'm going to shift and right click, and I'm going to choose the from option, since I know where that center point originates from. So I'll select from. I'll click on this end point. Now remember, when you use the from command, you have to type in the @ symbol. And it's going to go a -14 in the x direction, comma, and a -180 in the y direction. Once I hit the enter button, it's going to ask me for the radius, which is 200. And you can see now that that's the curvature of that overall arc that I was trying to create at the top part. Okay, so next I do have another line that I'm going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and create it off of this point here. So I know that going this direction is 56. So that gives me that end point. And remember that I did some math. If we want to, I can actually physically offset this going up at a distance of 6, and then I can create my circle from that, or I can do the math. Either way is fine with me. So I think I'll go ahead and offset this, and it'll make it a lot simpler. So I'll go to offset, type in the distance, which is 6. I'll offset this bottom line going up. And now I'm ready to create that circle, or that other arc that's located here. Once again, circle, center radius. Now this time I can use the from command again, but since it's just a straight line, what I'm going to do is touch this endpoint, and you'll notice that I tried to avoid the other two endpoints. Then I'm just going to move my cursor on the outside here, and just so it's tracking off of one location. So as I'm pulling down, now I need to give it that distance. So by me creating that offset, that tells me that it's going to be the pure radius, or the exact radius of that circle that I was trying to create. So I'll type in 112, and that'll give me the distance that's going down. And then I'll type in the radius again, which is 112. All right, so that gives me both of those arcs that I need. Let's go ahead and do one offset on this bottom one. So offset, the distance is back to 1. Select that line and above it. Okay, let's go ahead and erase this line here. And now you can see that we do have some straight lines that's going across here. And I'm just going to draw a line. And I have the quadrant. And remember that quadrant is one of my running O snaps. So if I select the fly up next to the O snap, you can see that I do have a check beside the quadrant, running O snap. So I'm just going to select this quadrant. I'll send it out that way. And I'll do the exact same thing here. Okay. The reason why I'm doing that is because right at the end point of where my circle is, and you can see it's at this intersection of this line that's coming down. So I have my two horizontal lines, and I have a intersection at this one, and it's just going to come down and intersect with this line. So that's what I need to create there. So I'll create a line, and I want to go from this intersection, and once again, intersection is one of my running O snaps. So I'm going to go from this intersection right down to the perpendicular. Now that's going to allow me to go ahead and trim these two lines that I just created, and everything should be fine. So I'll go to trim. And now remember that with the trim, I'm going to select the cutting edge since it's kind of messy that's going on in here. So I'll select the word cutting edge, select my line here, enter, and then I can select these two vertical lines that I just created. I'm sorry, these two horizontal lines. Okay, so now let's go ahead and trim out the rest of this stuff. Let's go back to the trim command, and I'm going to start with the big arc that's going around. You can see I can trim it here. I got a little bit left over in between here, and then that portion, and that should, and I think that it did get rid of that other part that I do, so I'm just going to use the undo in this command. One more undo. Okay. And so you can see that it don't like me. If I zoom in this way, it assumes that I want to take that part out. I'm just going to back out this direction. Then I'll trim it from here. Now I do know that I still have that little part there that I'll come back and delete later. Let's go ahead and trim these two portions. Okay, so with this arc, remember that we're just going right to that vertical line that I have created. Let's go ahead and get rid of these two horizontal lines. Now remember, before you get rid of that bottom one, go ahead and trim this portion of the circles off. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit. Alright, I'll go to escape. And like I said before, I do have that little portion down here that I'm just going to go ahead and delete. Okay, so that's it for the drawing portion of it. I figured that part out. Now let's go ahead and move on to the dimensions. So the first thing I need to do is go ahead and insert in a title block. And I'm going to use a A-size title block. And if you don't have an A-size title block, you can look at the previous video or some while back, and I'll try to remember to link this, is that you can go back and create the A-size title block. And I'm kind of looking here, and it looks like I got a double line there, and it actually is. Okay. Let me go ahead and delete the one that's not the vertical line. One quick way, and you can see both of these lines, one of them is an arc and the other one is the horizontal line. I need to trim it back to this line. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Trim that portion and here. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in our title block. So I'm going to use the insert command. Remember, it's just I enter, or you can go ahead and click on the insert tab here. So I'm going to use the insert command. I'll click the icon and I'll just select recent blocks. It's going to give me my recent blocks that I've used before. If you don't have any, this may be blank. I'll select this icon to navigate to the blocks menu. And once again, these are the two title blocks that I created, an A and a B size. And I'll also try to remember to link that in the video. Okay. So I'm going to choose the A size, go to open. It's following my cursor around. I'll type in 0, 0, 0, enter. Now the drawing was lucky enough to go ahead and give us the scale of this one, which is 1 to 10. So I'll go ahead and select the title block, right click and select properties. That's going to bring open my properties window. And I like to have this auto hid. So make sure that you have this icon showing that it is auto hid. And basically what that'll do is if I move off and click somewhere else, this window should hide. Sorry, and I actually turned it off. Let's go back to auto hide it. Okay. So you can see that when I come over near it, it will turn that back on and off. All right. So once again, select your title block, right click and go to properties. Where it says scale X, scale Y, and scale Z, go ahead and type in 10. All right, and you can see now that my title block is scaled to a 1/10. So now I'm going to go ahead and move this drawing, located somewhere on the inside of my title block here where I can feel comfortable drawing it. So I'm just going to use a regular move command. I'll go ahead and highlight these objects. And I'll go ahead and place them. Once again, I have my ortho turned on. So once I turn that off, it'll give me a little freedom to move it. Okay. So when I created this title block, I did have some line type differences on my title block. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and use the annotative method of putting these dimensions on. So basically I'm just going to set it to scale, and then I'll tell all of my dimensions and things of that nature to use the annotative option. So I have my scale. I'll go ahead and select it here. So it's 1 to 10. And once it's been adjusted to it, I'm going to do a regen, and I'm just going to type in RE, enter. And you're going to see now that I do have those hidden lines that's located around my circle. The next thing that I want to do is I want to go to my annotation tab. And then I'm going to tell all of my dimensions to go ahead and be put on the dimension layer. These layers were created whenever I brought in my title block, so I don't have to recreate those. Okay, so now here comes the hard part of this whole situation. It's once I go ahead and place my center marks, and there is a command that I can use to make sure all my center marks come on the right layer. And unfortunately, there is no toolbar for it, so I'm just going to type in center layer. Now I'll use the center layer command, and it's asking me what layer do I want to put it on. Well, I do have a layer called center. So now every time I create a center mark or a center line, it's going to automatically put it on that layer for me. So now I'll go ahead and select center mark. I'll select this arc. And you're going to see that that arc is way down here off of my page. Hence, that's why we're going to need a jog dimension. I'll go ahead and do the exact same one for this one. And that one is going to give me the same kind of option here. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to select both of these center marks. I'll come over to my properties window, and then I'll go ahead and take off the extension. So I'll go ahead and make that no. And then you can see where it says cross size. I'm just going to put another 0 in front of it. So it's going to be 0.01x. And it should have made those a lot smaller. Let's try that again. There we go. So now I have just two small little pluses. Let's go ahead and move this first plus, and I'm just going to move it going straight up. Once again, I'm using my tracking onto this. And remember the O-snap tracking, if you're looking for it, is just going to be, polar tracking is the one that I'm using. So I can use the polar tracking, and then that'll make sure that it keeps it going straight up and down. And somewhere around in this range. Now, it doesn't have to be anything exact or exact number off of it. Remember that we are just kind of putting it in an approximate location, so long as that it fits on our drawing. And there's my other one, and I'll do the exact same with this one. I'm just going to stretch it somewhere up around here. Okay, so now I have my two center marks located. Let's go ahead and do our jog dimensions on both of those. So underneath the drop down, and once again I'm still on the Annotate tab here, I'll choose jog. Next, it's going to ask me to select the arc, which is here. Now it's going to say give me the center location. Well, I went ahead and placed it here. And now you're going to see as I move my cursor, it's going to create that dimension. Then it's going to ask me where I want to put the jog. So right now I know my dimensions are small, and I'll go ahead and adjust that now, as I did forget to adjust my dimensions on that one step. Alright, so I'm just going to click the dimension drop down here. I'm going to double click on where it says Annotative. So I'm going to make that the current one. Go to Modify. And then I'm looking for the preference. So underneath the primary units, not preference, underneath the primary units, I'm looking for precision. Just make that 0. Okay. And then close. I'll select this dimension that I already created, and instead of deleting it, I'll go ahead and put it on the correct dimension style, which is underneath miscellaneous. Underneath the drop down, if you choose the one that says Annotative, you're going to see that it will go ahead and adjust and put that dimension on the correct one. Let's go ahead and do the jog dimension on this one. So I'm going to use jog, select the arc, select the center. Next, select where you want to put your dimension, and then you got to tell it where you want to place your jog. Let's go ahead and put some linear dimensions on here. So linear. Now go from this endpoint right down to that middle. And you can see mine is sitting at 17, and yours will probably be some other number, since we kind of guesstimated a location for it. But I'm going to continue and put the rest of the dimensions on. So I'll put the linear dimension from this endpoint to that one. I'll use the continue option to get me here. Let's put another linear dimension from this endpoint to that endpoint. And one more dimension, which is a linear one from this endpoint to this endpoint. Okay, So let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. We do have a jogged dimension here. So I'm going to select the jog dimension, and this one works for our linear and our line dimensions. I'll go ahead and select the dimension, and now it's asking me where do I want to place it at. So I picked somewhere above here. Go ahead and double click on the 17. I'm just going to hit the delete button, and I'll overwrite this one and type in 180. Underneath this dimension, so I'll go ahead and select it. Press the N button on my keyboard, followed by Enter. And it's a typical dimension. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to show you about these jog dimensions is that sometimes they look a little bit bigger, and you can't control too much of that part of it, but you can control the angle of it or how you can kind of view it. So by default, these are set at 45 degrees, and that number is going to be located inside of your dimensions. Modify, and I'll give it a second to load. Symbols and arrows, and you can see that radial jogged angle is located here. Go ahead and select cancel and close. But what I want to do is I want to manipulate this. So I'm going to select this dimension, go to my properties window. You can see where it says jog angle. And if I make that number 30, and you're going to see that the lower this number is, the steeper that's going to wind up getting. So I'll type in 30 here. And you can see that that's getting a lot steeper. So I tend to make it a little bit bigger, somewhere around 60. And you can see that that's a little bit more pleasant for this dimension. If you wanted to, you probably can even go to 75, and that'll kind of clear it a little bit from these other two dimensions. Do the same on this one. So let's go ahead and select this dimension. I'm going to go underneath properties where it says 45. And just to be consistent with the other one, let's go ahead and make that 75 as well. And hit escape twice to go ahead and clear it. Last thing I have to do is go ahead and fill in my title block. And remember, that's easy. Just select your title block. If I go to the properties, here are the attributes. And underneath the scale, it's 1:10. Okay. So those are the typical jog dimensions that you're going to run into. Either it's going to be a linear one, or it's going to be the occasional radial one. The one thing I will warn you about is that if I try to zoom the extents, it will give me all of that, but when I go to print this, it's going to include the centers, which is located of these two circles, or arcs I should say, which are located somewhere down here, and I think I can show you that real quick. So if I wanted to print this, I go to Control P. And you may have saw me do this in other videos. So I'm going to select DWG to PDF. So imagine that I want to create a PDF of this. I tend to like the ANSI full bleed. And it's going to be an A size, so it's going to be 11 by 8.5. I'll tend to go to Extents. Center it. And fit to paper, and you can see that it is going 1:1 monochrome. And I want to preview it. Oh, that's weird. At first it wasn't working correctly, but I guess it's working correctly now. But just in case if yours does not do this or work properly, instead of choosing the extents option, you can always choose the the window option. Select this endpoint to this endpoint, and then use all the rest of the settings by centering the plot, and remember that we set this to 1 to 10 monochrome. So if yours though do show those centers that are offline, you can always use this window option, and that will also make sure that those centers are lined up correctly. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I kind of fumbled through some of these things, but these are some of those rare occasions when you're going to use the jog dimensions. And I hope this was kind of useful to you. If you have any additional comments or something that you want to see me do, you can add some of that stuff in the comments. Or if there's anything that's, kind of unclear, I'll go back and try my best to clean this up. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next AutoCAD video.